Waiting for somebody to come on. You're the first one. Can you hear me, James? Awesome. I never know if I'm doing this right. I don't do it often enough. I'm always out of touch. Let me close my door. Jennifer's sleeping in this morning. She stayed up last night watching her murder porn. Hello, Richard. James Cotter. Hey, James Cotter. How you doing? Excuse me. First words I've spoken today. Thank you, James. What's new? Not much, really. Just getting back on track for shooting videos. I actually went out Wednesday with a couple from New Zealand, and another guy from the Cajon Pass area joined us. We went out and chased some trains around, shot some videos, and got some pretty good stuff, I think. I hope. I haven't looked at the videos yet, but doing that, dealing with my dad's estate. It's been, I'm not going to say complicated, just it's a mess. He had a trust, but he has a lot of stuff that we have to try to get rid of. And yeah, it's been a struggle. I hope everybody's doing well this morning. James Marty, where are you from? Clovis. I used to do a lot of work in Fresno, but never got over to Clovis much. Gregory Allen, where are you from? Welcome, Carl Stupinski. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm only as well versed in the Road Retirement Board as it has applied to me. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but it's been a pretty simple it was a pretty simple process when I retired. Oh, cool. We were just in Pennsylvania last month. We didn't have the opportunity to get over to the Lancaster area. We were staying with friends in Osceola Mills, which is up by State College. And the far east as we got was, I guess, probably Gettysburg, which is, I know, in the south central part of the state, but most of the stuff we did was in the western part of the state. It was beautiful. Had a really good time, saw a lot of cool stuff. You'll have to excuse me bobbing and weaving because I can't. I wear glasses, but if I have my glasses on, I can't see the writing. And if I don't have my glasses on, I have to look at it close. And it has nothing to do with being old. I've been wearing glasses since I was 15 and having to use reading glasses. If I had my contacts in, I have to wear reading glasses, and that's been going on since I was 42. Mike Lockhart, are you playing in this game? No, I'm just kidding. I don't follow football anymore, college, or I never really followed college that much, except my grandson was in college, and I haven't followed the NFL since the last game he played. He retired in 2017. So enjoy your game. Which one are you waiting for? Thank you, Richard. I hope it's not dying either. Yeah, it was odd to get so few views, and not that I mean my videos. I would say that they average about, I don't know. The average is probably 1,800, 2,000 views for my usual videos. I do have derailment videos and things that occur. How things work videos that do a lot better than that. But yeah, the last couple of videos I put out, neither of them have over 1,000 views yet, which is unusual, but not heartbreaking. I'm just curious as to what's going on. And a lot of people said, maybe it's dropped, the algorithm has dropped it down. I don't know how any of that works. Had a friend suggest to me to start doing more shorts, and that keeps your channel up there. So I went out. I thought there might have been a derailment up on the BNSF north of me here yesterday. So if any of you saw the short that I put out last night, that didn't happen. It was just I don't know what was going on. It was all, whatever they were doing was done by the time I got up there. And I shot a short of an Amtrak making a meet outside of town here. Nothing exciting, but I'm going to start doing some more shorts and see if that helps. Hey, Brian, how's it going? 765874 unification. What's that? No, I didn't. James Marty. Yes, I did. I worked for the railroad from 1979 until 2019. I hired out with Southern Pacific, retired from Union Pacific, and I was in the signal department. No, I'll have to check that out. I'll look it up and see what's going on. Brian, that's for all of you who don't know. I am a lifelong Star Trek fan. Star Trek went on the air when I was 8 years old, and my mom used to let me stay up late. It was on late Friday nights, and she let me stay up and watch it with her. And so I've always been a Trekkie. And the technical name for people who follow Star Trek was supposed to be Trekkers, but I like the way Trekkie sounds better. And I think that's pretty much the popular lexicon now. The Odessa Bulldogs. As I said, I don't. Now, is that I know that high school football in Texas is more popular than college. Is that a high school, the Odessa Bulldogs? Is that a high school team? Thomas Pinnock. Good morning from Bakersfield, California. How's the weather back in Indiana? It's finally raining here. It rained, I guess, most of the night. I went to bed early last night. Fell asleep early. I didn't plan on going to bed that early, but I woke up this morning and everything was wet. And that's always nice here. We get about, I think our average is 5 inches here. So, yeah, we haven't had a good rainstorm since we had a golf tournament. Was it last weekend? Yeah, last Saturday we had a golf tournament, or no, I'm sorry, I had a charity tournament 2 weekends ago, and it actually rained right at the beginning of the tournament. It only rained for a couple of hours. That's the first rain we'd had since April, and this is the first rainstorm where it rained from. I guess it rained all night, according to what people say. I don't know. I was asleep. And I just got a notification on my phone a minute ago that said rain ending soon. When I opened my door and looked outside about an hour ago, it wasn't raining anymore. Odessa, Missouri. Okay, I assumed that was Texas. I'm sorry. It's like Miami of Ohio. That always confused me. Rainy and cold in Indiana. It's just rainy here. It isn't cold. The temperature is 52 degrees right now, and that is not cold. Hey, Jerry, what's going on, my friend? For all of you who don't know, Jerry KE4TTS, Jerry Davis, is a subscriber and a patron, and we went out. What was it? About a month ago, Jerry. Went out and chased some trains, had a good time, and hope get to see you again sometime. No, okay, Brian. Well, have fun at Knott's Berry Farm. That was the last amusement park I went to. I don't do amusement parks anymore. I'm too old for that. And I have vertigo. I don't have it all the time, but going on roller coasters that go upside down will set it off. So I avoid amusement parks. I'm not going to pay all that money if I can't ride the rides. That's why I always preferred Magic Mountain over Disneyland, because I didn't care about all the other stuff Disneyland has. I wanted to ride roller coasters, and Magic Mountain had the best ones. Yeah. Carl, yeah, the weather when we were in Pennsylvania, the one day that we went to the horseshoe curve, it was cold and windy and spitting sleet and stuff like that. But that was the only time the weather was bad the whole time we were there. It was really nice, beautiful, easy to go. There was nothing we couldn't go see. Everything, the weather was just awesome. I really liked it. September doesn't seem like that long ago. I can't believe this year's almost over, Jerry. It's incredible. I just can't believe how fast it's gone. Yeah, Carl. Yeah, vertigo sucks. I can tell you that. It's been a long time since I've had a really serious bout with it, but I still every once in a while I get a little off balance and I just have to lay down and stay that way for a while. Back when it first started, when I was in my 40s, the first few episodes I had with it were debilitating, and I didn't know what was wrong. And when I finally went to the doctor, they told me what it was, and they said there's nothing we can do about it. They don't know what causes it, just like kidney stones, which I've dealt with before. They don't know what causes it from person to person. There's no definitive. It's an inner ear thing, but they don't know what brings it on, and there's really nothing they can do about it. There's no medication you can take other than meclizine to lessen the effects of it. But yeah, it's no fun. Richard in Vermont, yeah, that sounds like unusual. A drought probably is not common up in that area, but it's we live in a constant drought here. It's the Central Valley is doesn't get much rain at all. The coast steals it if it's coming from the west. The coast ranges suck up all the moisture, and if it comes in from the east, the Sierras suck up all the moisture. So we just get hosed. As you get further north in the valley, Tulare, Fresno, Clovis, you get a little bit more rain, but I would imagine that Fresno, Clovis probably doesn't get any more than 6 inches a year. I don't know if that's sounds about right. I know it rains a little bit more up there, but not much. No, you're James. You're in Denver. Yeah, James Cotter. I don't know if you ever saw the videos that I did from Denver. One of my daughters has lived there 2 different times, and I've gone back there and really enjoyed Denver. For a big city, Denver is pretty cool. It's not a big city like LA, but when you're dealing with downtown areas, it's hard to tell the difference between a place with 5 million people and a place with 1 million. But I like Denver. It reminded me of Tehachapi. The climate is almost exactly the same. The snow up there's like Tehachapi. It snows and it doesn't stick around too awful long. And I really enjoyed it. Denver's a beautiful town. Took the metro around and checked all that stuff out. I really like Denver. You're welcome, Jerry. It was my pleasure. We had a good time. I and I was telling the couple that I took out Wednesday from New Zealand. I've never had a bad experience with subscribers taking them out and show them around the Tehachapi and wherever we go. It's always been fun, and we've always caught a lot of trains. You're likely going to see quite a few trains on Tehachapi. And as I tell people, if there aren't a lot of trains, if you can catch one at the bottom of the hill, you can chase it all the way up the top of the hill and see it 3 or 4 times because they're going so slow. Same thing going down. So you can catch the same train in a lot of really cool places. James Marty, your uncle was a fireman and a brakeman and later a conductor on the Daylight during World War II. Wow. Yeah, I'll bet there were some interesting conversations. My family were all oil field people. I was the first male in my family. My mom's family came here in the early 1940s, and my grandfather and my uncles, and they all went to work in the oil fields. And I shouldn't say every man, but all the ones I was close with. And I was the first one of that part of our family to not go into the oil fields, although I did do it a little while shortly before I went to work for the road. I worked on a drilling rig for a little while, and I held oil field freight for a little while. And then when I was laid off, I worked in the oil field construction and drove trucks again for a little while, hauling oil field stuff. But I was the first railroader. So I didn't get to have any cool railroad discussions. I just had to sit around and listen to him talk about the oil fields, which always kind of, I don't know. While the industry itself and how the drilling and everything works fascinates me, I don't want to listen to their stories. Oh, Carl, so you suffered the vertigo thing. Yeah. Yeah. I had no idea. I was at work one day and I leaned over to get something out of my glove compartment and the whole world went crazy. And I had to stay there until they sent somebody to drive me back to Bakersfield. I couldn't drive. It was it was terrible. T904 Med, Northern Georgia. Do you live in Georgia? I guess so. You're telling me about it. I'm assuming that, but there are a lot of cool old railroads, excursion stuff back in the in the South, Pennsylvania. There are tons of them. They don't have that many out here in California. They're around, but nothing like the proliferation of them back east. I'm hoping I would really like to get back to Pennsylvania again. We saw enough cool stuff while we were there that it would be cool to go back and check out the eastern part of the state. I really want to. We planned on going to Hershey and check that out in York to the Harley plant and all that, but we just didn't have time. It wasn't doable. And Jennifer really wanted to go to Amish country. According to our friends, that is more in the eastern part of the state. But when we stopped, I don't know how many of you saw the little clip I did at the beginning of the Gettysburg video where we stumbled across the East Broad Top. Some loads of people, I don't know if they were Amish or Mennonites or what, but a whole bunch of vans came in, and there were probably 50 of them, and they were going to ride that train. And so that's about as close as we got to anything like that. But Jennifer really wanted to check out Amish country and some of the I guess the little farmers market type things that they have. I don't know anything about it. But so, yeah, we were going to go up to Niagara Falls, and I don't really care about Niagara Falls that much. But he says it's wonderful. My daughter's been there. Tracy said, my friend who lives in Pennsylvania, said it was wonderful. But I don't know. I'd rather go check out trains and interesting historical stuff. All right, Brian, thanks. Enjoy your day at Knott's. Try to enjoy your breakfast at Denny's. Denny's is okay. Aunt Flynn, Bristol, England. All right. Welcome. Thank you for joining, and thank you for watching. Thank all of you for watching. I really appreciate it. You're the reason I do this. If I only had 100 viewers, I wouldn't do this. It's a very time consuming, a lot of work, a lot of driving. It's not cheap, but I enjoy sharing it. So I'm so glad that so many of you enjoy it. I really am, and I really appreciate every viewer. I think I'm going to start doing the YouTube membership thing. I've had quite a few people say that if I do that, they would join. People don't want to do Patreon for some reason, but Patreon has they've made some changes to the way people join, where it's going to cost them a little bit more. And I don't know. They sent me an email about it. Patreon did, and it kind of annoyed me that they were going to do that. And when I started my Patreon account, I figured at the time I had 16,000 subscribers, and I figured I could get at least 100 patrons. And if they wanted to pay $3 or $6 a month, which are only the two tiers I have, that would cover all my expenses. of doing all this. It would probably 300 probably wouldn't, but nonetheless. But it, the most patrons I've ever had at one time was 22, and I've just had 2 people leave Patreon. So I don't know. I think I'm going to try the membership thing out and maybe just get rid of the Patreon because you need to offer your patrons or your members, if you're on YouTube, other things other than just, hey, give me money to watch my stuff. Do some content that just for them, which I've done a few of those things on Patreon, exclusive content, I guess it's called. So we'll see how it goes. Brian, we rode the train there. That train that's at Knott's Berry Farm. Last time we were there was in, I don't know, gosh, it's been a long time, 2012 or 13, I guess. So if that's the train that was there then, yeah, I rode it. Cold, rainy Barry from cold and rainy New England. The drought is over. Good. Welcome. As I was saying earlier, it's raining here in Bakersfield too. So for the first time this is the first big rain we've had since April. It rained a couple of weeks ago, but only for a couple of hours. Yeah, Carl, a lot of steam stuff back there. I did notice that. And in the looking through things, and I've had subscribers tell me that you should go here, you should go there, you should do this, and there's this, and there's so many of them. I'll never get a chance to ride all of them. I want to do the Strasburg. I really liked the one we did, the Everett Railroad, because it was one of the longer ones. Would have been about a 50-mile round trip, and it lasted 2.5 hours. And you got to watch the locomotive, move from one end to the other. If you watch the video, you saw it. But yeah, really cool. And we don't have much steam out here. We have it, but not much. Hey, Alex, welcome. Alex Schmollinger. His father, Steve, was a Southern Pacific trainman. I'm not exactly sure if he was an engineer or what, but I know he was in the operating department. Fantastic photographer. Got, let's see. Give me a second. I'm looking here. There it is. Mm-hmm. This is a book from Steve. Got some wonderful photography, the old Southern Pacific stuff. But yeah, I didn't know Steve personally. I had heard his name, as it is with a lot of trainmen. We in the civil department, we didn't interact with trainmen very often, so we didn't. Here's some of the photography, but yeah, we didn't interact with them much. Hear their names on the radio. I started playing golf in 2015 in the Southern Pacific Golf Club, and met a guy named Ron Marney, who I'd heard on the radio most of my career. He retired in 2005, and but I'd never met him until I started playing golf with him. Thank you, Barry. I'm glad you enjoy it, and I enjoy doing it for you. As a matter of fact, I've just been getting out again since Dad passed. I have had virtually no time to spend doing working on my channel. Thankfully, I had a lot of clips already recorded and things ready to go up, and then the Pennsylvania vacation helped out a lot. But I went out when I went out with the people from New Zealand. That was the first time that I had gone out specifically to shoot videos since the middle of September. And Jerry, I think Jerry, can't remember if it was you or Stephen, my friend from England. That was the last. That was the last time I went out to shoot videos, and life just overtook me, and so it felt good to go out shoot videos, and I'm getting stoked to go do it again. I'm getting itchy to get out and not have to deal with all the crap I've had to deal with since July. Tom McAdams, welcome. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching the channel. Lifelong SP fan from Vegas. Keep up the good work. Yeah, I don't get over to Vegas much anymore. I go through it every once in a while, but I think I burned myself out on gambling in the 90s and 2000s. And we used to go over there a lot. And kids get tired of it. I don't know. Vegas is a pretty cool place. Most people don't know that there's a city once you leave the strip or the downtown area. My daughter lived over there. Her mom's lived there for many, many, many years. And so we used to take her over and drop her off and go to the museums and the restaurants. You ever go to Blueberry Hill? Last time my buddy and I went over there, if you saw the video that we went over there and watched the implosion of the Tropicana. And before we left town, I told Kenny, we got to go up to Blueberry Hill. So, yeah, I like Blueberry Hill. It's probably one of the better breakfast places that I've ever been to. I really like it. Carl Stupinski, the one in Jim Thorpe. Is there actually a town called Jim Thorpe back there? Where is that? That sounds interesting. Yeah, I knew, Alex, I knew your dad had passed away. I didn't know it was from COVID. It almost got me. But yeah, sorry to hear that. Carl, yes. Part of my job was riding on the head end occasionally, not very often. I probably did it 10 times as a maintenance foreman. It was never part of my job as a maintainer or during when I was in construction. I don't even think it was 10 times, probably not even that much. If I sat down and thought about it, I could remember all of them. But yeah, so I rode over the Tatch, being out across the desert and up the valley, which is mind-numbingly boring going up the San Joaquin Valley. Straight as a string, and everything looks the same. Driving up the valley is the same thing, whether you're on I-5 or 99. It's like, oh my gosh, you drive 100 miles and swear you haven't gone anywhere. But when I had the Daggett to Vegas section, did that a few times, 2 or 3 times, and I had that section for about 3 years. But yeah, so yeah, I get to ride on the head ends quite a bit. I wouldn't want to be a trainman. I don't know how those guys do it. It would just drive me crazy. It would, and it'd have. I don't know how they stay awake. The locomotive has that hum. They're super smooth. They're quiet, and they just have that hum from the engines behind you. And it's like, oh my gosh, it just lulls you to sleep. So, yeah, kudos to those guys for being able to stay awake. And the reason they had the maintenance foreman ride locomotives was to make sure all the signals look good. And occasionally we'd have train crews complain about a specific signal. And if we went out in the field and looked at it and it looked okay to us from the field, they would, and if it got more complaints, we would get on a train and see how it looked from the train. There were a few times that I did that, and the crew I was with didn't have the people who were complaining about it. And I'd say, hey, this signal look okay to you? They said, yeah. Well, I tell them somebody complained about it. And they said, no, see that signal just fine. Sometimes they could see them, and I thought they weren't good signals. They're like, yeah, the signal's fine. So just depends on the person, I guess. James Cotter, I have never been to the Feather River. It's one of the places I want to go and do a video, some videos. I know they don't run a lot of trains through there, so that's a long way from where I live, and it's I hesitate to go those distances unless I know I'm going to catch a train, but might go up there on the Harley sometime, make a vacation out of it, and go up Feather River and go over to Reno that way, and because it looks beautiful. But I'd sure like to catch a train if I go that far. Allentown. Yes, Allentown's way over in the eastern part of the state above Philadelphia. So yeah, that's someplace we might try to hit next time. Every night this time, except for the first night, when we landed, we went. Our friends weren't going to be home that night or until late that night, so we spent the night in Indiana, Pennsylvania. And but other than that, we would go do what we were going to do, then drive back to Osceola Mills, and we stayed there. And the next trip, we probably won't do that. We'll probably spend some time spending the night in other places so we can see more things in the eastern part of the state. Yeah, Carl, we were all familiar with the territory. I spent my entire career in essentially the same areas. What on Southern Pacific was the old San Joaquin division between Madera, California, and out at the top of Cajon Pass, a station called Highland, which is by, I guess, Victorville would be the closest town to it. And so I was very familiar with the territory. And the only time I didn't work in that area specifically was when I had the Daggett to Vegas side, but I still had Bakersfield to Highland at that time. I had over 400 miles of territory, and but yeah, I was pretty familiar with it already. And they didn't do a lot of signal upgrades while I was doing that, and even after they did, when they finished the signal upgrades in 2016, I didn't go out and ride any trains after 2016 when they put in the new LEDs. And the LEDs are awesome signals. And I know a lot of purists say, oh, the searchlights. And the searchlights were good signals as long as they were aimed properly. An LED, you just point it in the general direction and you'll be able to see it. They have no moving parts. And I actually, as far as a signalman, much preferred the LED signals over the searchlights. And you have to test them. Searchlights, you had to climb up, change bulbs, and check voltages, and just part of these tests that were FRA tests, rock the heads. It was slide the relays, the polar relays. It was a real pain. Yeah, Brian, they're right there. Those aren't going anywhere. Neither is the Three Stooges one. Those, which I think I've told Brian the story behind those. The story behind those drawings is that the guy that did them was not licensed to do them. I bought them at a kiosk in Valley Plaza, the old mall here in Bakersfield, back in the early 90s. And shortly after I did that, that guy had to legally stopped doing them. They wouldn't give him a license to do it. They probably would have if he would have asked to begin with. But so, yeah, those, I don't know how rare those are, but I know that that artist wasn't able to do those anymore, and they're excellent drawings, and I'm proud to have them. Never get rid of them. Yeah, Alex, the oil train, for all of you who don't know, the oil train used to run from Bakersfield down to Wilmington and San Pedro, where all the refineries are, and pump off the oil into the storage tanks down there. It ran once every 24 hours. It was a 77 car unit train, and all the cars were connected in 11 car blocks, were connected by hoses. So they would fill the first car up, and then when it was full, they would just fill the car, and they didn't have to keep moving around to spot the cars. And it back then, the locomotives weren't powerful like they are today, and it usually had about 5 units on the front and 4 or 5 helpers in the middle. It was a spectacular train to watch. I thought it was really cool too, Alex. Chris Stark, yeah, I knew Chris. He was the communications guy out in Palmdale, and yeah, I knew Chris really well. Shit the bed, Grandma. He used to always say. But yeah, I liked Chris. He was a pretty cool cat, funny, and always enjoyed his. We didn't work around each other a lot, but we shared the same headquarters. The 2 different times I was headquartered in Palmdale back in the late '80s and early '90s, up into the mid '90s. So yeah, I knew Chris really well. Maintainers are going to be tested by the FRA. They're going to, for like competency or something. If that's the case, I can't disagree with that. I worked with guys who had been here for 30 years and didn't know what they were doing. And a couple of them, I used to tell my bosses, you can do something about this guy. He's dangerous. He's going to, some of them, well, one of them did cause a big problem and was disciplined for it and get fired. But I used to tell them, these guys are going to get somebody killed. They're going to cause derailments. These guys don't know what they're doing. So yeah, I guess I really don't have a problem with that. The company should be doing that. Training was never required. You had to do your first 4 signal phases. Those were required. If you didn't pass, you had to take a test at each one of those. If you didn't pass that, you were gone. But as far as the training the company offered, they should have made a lot of that stuff mandatory, but they didn't. They'd say, if you want to go take this training class, go ahead. And I took all of them. I went to hot box detector classes, and even though I didn't really deal with it, that was the area of the technician, but I wanted to know as much as I could because it made my job easier, and it made me easier to try to help other people do things. But I think a lot of guys, they would say, well, Mark knows. And it's like, yeah, but you need to know too. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I hate government overreach. I hate government meddling in a lot of things. But when it comes to stuff like signal work, we need to make sure the people out there know what they're doing. Carl, I don't know. They do that for conductors on Amtrak. Is that what you're saying? That the FRA tests them as well? Do they test? I don't know much about Amtrak. I don't know anything about Amtrak except that it's a passenger service and it loses a lot of money every year. But those, am I correct in thinking that Amtrak are one-man crews so that everybody on there, so that the crew would need to have these FRA tests? Is that what you're talking about? James Carter, I see you say, yeah, they're about the Moffat Tunnel, talking about the lines they don't use. The last time I went to Denver, when I came back, I really wanted to catch something up at the Moffat Tunnel. They had just had a big snowstorm. It had pretty much the snow had pretty much melted in those areas by the time I was leaving and going back home. And I went to Central City, and I was talking to some locals there, and they said, "Yeah, you could probably get up. You could probably get up to the tunnel. I guess it's dirt road access for most part." They said, but the one guy who's worked at the tourist place, I can't remember what they call those, tourist information. He said they don't run many trains up through here anymore. So, man, you might drive all the way up there and go, get your truck all muddy for no reason. So I decided not to do it. But I don't know. I don't suppose watching a train come out of the Moffat tunnels any different than watching them come out of tunnel 16 or 17 in Tehachapi. They're only 250 feet long because the portal's a portal, but the Moffat tunnel's historic. So I wanted to do that, but I'll probably never get the chance to do that again. Yeah, Brian, you said something a while back about that Night Rider thing, but in 1981, I was actually laid off, so I certainly didn't know. And had I not been laid off, I would have been working out in the desert, headquartered likely at Palmdale. But yeah, I got laid off at the end of 1980, and I did work in Tulare quite a bit, and then later in my career, I worked in Selma a lot. But yeah, I'd never even heard about that. A Centra relay. I don't know what that is. We all the relays when we upgraded in when we finished the upgrades in 2016, we got rid of most of the relays. Probably 99.9% of them. You still had your switch relays and your indication relays at control points, but all the intermediates were all racks and all microprocessor stuff. And the relays, the brand we used was at SP was exclusively Union Switch and Signal. '82, I was still laid off then. I was laid off. I got laid off at the end of 1980. At the end of 1980, and didn't get called back until January of 1984. I had pretty much forgotten about the railroad, to be honest with you, because all I ever did when I did work was dig ditches and run equipment. I did zero, absolutely no signal work. Other than building things, but I never wired anything. I didn't learn how to read prints, nothing. And then when I came back, I went to I'd never worked up the valley really, and I went to Tulare, and my foreman, we didn't know each other, and he just saw that I had 5 years seniority, and he handed me a set of prints when they were putting a crossing in. He goes, "Hey, want to go wire that up?" And I said, "I don't have any idea what any of this means." Told him my story, and he goes, "Oh, we'll grab a shovel." But so I learned to read prints quickly, so I didn't have to grab shovels so often. Alex, no, I would never work. Not only would I not work for a railroad ever again, I won't work anywhere ever again. I'm retired. I'm not one of those. I know so many people who retire and then go do something else. And I retired because I don't want to work anymore. I want to enjoy the rest of my life doing the things I want to do, and I don't want to have a schedule. I don't want to be obligated to do anything. And people would say, "Well, if you get bored," and I thought, "Well, if I get that bored, I'll go marshal at a golf course for free golf. Don't even pay me; just let me play golf for free, or maybe a counter job at the Harley shop." But I don't even want to do that. I love the independence of retirement. And I will say that if the California High Speed, because I submitted a resume when I was still working to the California High Speed Rail, because those are high six figures, I say high six figure, like 200 grand a year for their consultants. And if they were to call me and say, "Hey, we're going to pay you 200 grand a year if you want to come out here and stand around and act like you're doing something," I might do that, since my tax money's already going to this boondoggle of a project. I might as well get something out of it, but they're not going to do that. I don't even know if I would do that. I'm not hurting financially. I'm not rich, but I don't need to work, and I hope that never changes. So no, I wouldn't go back to work for it. And the railroads have changed so much. The expectations and just I don't know. I try to keep politics out of off my channel, but they're pandering to groups and people, and I'm just not into that. I'm I'm a little too blunt for that world. I'll probably get myself in trouble. Oh, okay, Carl. All right. So, yeah, that's interesting. So the conductors, even though they're not operating the train, are tested by the FRA for what? You'd think the engineers would be the ones that the FRA would be more interested in people operating the train. Move back a little bit here. Give me a second. I'm trying to get caught up. I actually this time usually I don't put any restrictions, anything added to the live stream, but I put a 10-second delay so can only get comments will only come up 10 seconds after you make the comment. So because sometimes in the past it would get moving so fast I couldn't keep up with the conversation. So forgive me if in these breaks when I'm staring off or looking at this stuff. Yeah, Carl, it's all done with radio in Tehachapi where there's no line of sight and in some of the canyons and whatnot. They actually use fiber optics to do the communications with. But yeah, as far as electromagnetics, it's all gone, and I'm glad. A lot of people didn't like it, but I am. I enjoyed the challenge of upgrades and new systems. I really enjoyed it, and the new systems were easy to troubleshoot. They almost told you where the problem was. Oh, centrifugal relays. Hmm, interesting. I've never even heard of them. Alex, PSR, I'll tell everybody, I don't really have it. I don't know how much PSR really changed. Things were going that way anyway. It's not like there was this big revolution. Things were moving towards that already. And I am not a financial guy. But I can guarantee you this: if it wasn't profitable, the railroad wouldn't do it. And I hear people, they make comments all the time in other forums I see, and well, I hope the shareholders are happy. If you work for the railroad, you better hope the shareholders are happy, or you're not going to have a job. The shareholders, other than Amtrak, they're the only reason railroads exist. They're the only reason they can afford to exist. You have to attract investments to keep your company going. And uh, I don't know how much PSR changed. Uh, I know that it changed stuff for crews. For we folks on the ground, it made virtually no difference to us. I know that they run longer trains, and I'm going to do a deal on derailments here because I get tired of people talking about how many more derailments they have than they used to have, and that is absolutely untrue and not supported by numbers. Uh, they were putting short trains on the ground. I have forgotten how many derailments I've worked in my career, and they were doing it. I mean, PSR came into existence on Union Pacific. It was called the United 2020 Plan. They started implementing it in 2016, I think. And the first thing they did was get rid of 1,500 management positions. They started clearing out the glass house in Omaha. And before it was all said and done, I think they got rid of 3,000 management positions. So it didn't just affect people on in the trains. I don't know. It's one of those things that it's got its pros and it's got its cons, but so does everything else. I don't know, but seems to be working. So that from the railroad's perspective, you can't blame them for doing that. Anthony Maida, is that Maida? Maida, is that how you pronounce your name? I hope you get that right. But yeah, it's easy to. I have a lot of hobbies to begin with. I don't indulge in like astronomy anymore much. I have a really nice telescope. Living in Bakersfield, if I want to go engage in it, I have to load everything up and take it somewhere where it's even Tehachapi anymore has got so much light pollution. Tehachapi's not a small town anymore. It's a big town pretending that it's still a small town. But yeah, my guitar, I don't play much anymore. I need to get back into it. I got so busy over the last couple of years since COVID dealing with other things. I need to get back into it. I've given most of my guitars to my grandson. As you can see, there used to be a whole wall of them, plus ones I had in the closet. These are the only ones left, and 2 of those are his. He just doesn't have anywhere to put them. So yeah, I like having hobbies. Keeps me busy, gives me things to do, like this channel. Glenn Foster. Depends on the railroad. If some of the short lines are not involved in railroad retirement, so you can go to work for them. You can be a consultant and do that stuff, and that is not considered part of your deal. But you can only make $18,000 a year until you're 60. And for me, in my case, once I'm 65, then I can make whatever I want. But until then, I can't make any more than $18,000 a year, or anything over that they'll subtract from my railroad retirement benefits, which will go back to normal at 65. Or I'm sorry. Yeah, for me it was 65 because I retired early. There are a lot of things that you can still do concerning railroads. You just can't work in a railroad retirement covered job. Yeah, the Tennessee Pass. I refresh my memory. I can't remember where that is. I've heard about it and I've read about it, but I can't remember where it is. Oh, okay, Carl. Yeah, that makes sense for the testing the conductors, making sure they know what they're doing. It's a good thing to know that people know what they're doing. Tom McAdams. Yes, I was the foreman on that job west of Lancaster. That was because, yeah, exactly. Santa Fe wanted to run double stacks. Southern Pacific wasn't going to do it, so Santa Fe notched all the tunnels that had curves in them on the Tehachapi for clearance for the double stacks. So they made Southern Pacific go out and put that high wide detector at Lancaster in case they sent any high wide trains through, trying to sneak some through. And they already had the one down at Bena, so they didn't need one down there. But yeah, that's exactly what it was for. And we were in the middle of putting a crossing in Selma, and my manager, we showed up one morning and he said, put that project on hold. Hottest project on the planet is now going to be this high wide detector. So we went out there, and took us, I don't know, I think we spent about 2 weeks out there getting that all set up. But yeah, it was a big deal. And then after the merger, Union Pacific started running double stacks. BNSF said hey, you can't do that. And Union Pacific said, yeah, we can. We don't have any agreement or contract with you. And BNSF uh, took him to court, or was going to take him to court. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but in the end, I think they did take him to court, and the courts agreed that Union Pacific didn't make that contract, that agreement. So then they started running, UP started running double stacks, and Santa Fe, BNSF. Of course, the tunnels were notched before the BNSF Santa Fe merger. So they ended up paying for the tunnel job, and Union Pacific got free access to nice, good conditions for running double stacks. Yeah, thanks, James. I for a long time I was kind of a political animal. I'm a conservative. I'm not going to blow any smoke up anybody's hoo-ha, but for a long time I was an animal, and I had another channel that I did that stuff on. But I don't know. I'm so sick of politics. It used to be fun because people didn't hate each other. You just had debates and sometimes arguments, but now it's become so divisive. It's just not fun anymore. Uh, if I if I want to be mad about things, I'll open up my bill box. I just Life's too short to be pissed off about things like that and get all burnt out about it. And I just tell people now, you know what? I'm just going to vote, and that's all I can do. Pissing and moaning about it to people who are never going to agree with me, or saying things to people that are just going to go, yeah, it's a waste of time. I'd rather be shooting videos for all of you to enjoy, enjoying trips with my family, and doing things that are fun, like sitting around watching Star Trek reruns. Have we heard anything about one-man crews? That's always being kicked around, mostly by people outside of the industry. Of course, the railroads would love to get down to one-man crews because that saved them a bunch of money. But it's not something that they're pushing right now. The railroads are very good at picking their battles, and they don't engage in battles that they're not relatively certain they can win. And the recent almost strike of the crews about on duty times and stuff is a good example of that. In the end, the railroad pretty much got their way. The crews got some of this and some of that, but the railroad picked that battle and decided to fight that battle because they're relatively certain that they could not so much be victorious, but because they had a really good chance of maintaining the balance that they wanted. And it worked out. Thank you, Alex. You have a happy Thanksgiving too. Oh, you play bass? Back in the 80s when I was playing in bands and playing all the time, I bought a bass and started messing around with it, but I never put enough effort into it. I never put enough effort into playing guitar, even though I played back then. I played all the time. I was still a lazy guitarist. I'm still a lazy guitarist. But I like to joke, how do you get a bass player off your porch? Pay for the pizza. How many lead vocalists does it take to screw in a light bulb? Just one. They hold the light bulb while the world revolves around them. How do you know when you're talking to a guitar player? They'll tell you. Latrell. Hey, how you doing, Latrell? Where are you from? Edgar Herrera. Saludos. Where are you from? Any update on the drone fiasco? No, they've stopped responding to me. They tried to, I sent them my flight logs for both of the issues, and they responded with the first one and said, oh, you did this wrong input. And it's like, no, I didn't. That's the problem. I did the right input and it did the wrong thing. And I was already pretty proficient with the drone by the time that happened. So I knew that I didn't do that. And then I said, okay, well, what about the second issue where the drone was completely, it was uncontrollable. I can't believe I was at the point where I was really afraid because there was a road right there, Edison. I was afraid that it was going to hit a car or something, and it ended up just hitting another tree and messing it up. But now and I said, the transmitter and receiver, the controller and the drone won't pair up. They won't connect. What's the deal with that? And they never heard back from them. And I told them, send me your address. I'll send you this drone back, because I don't want it. It's still sitting right there, right there on my shelf. It's a shame. It was a pretty cool drone, So I think I'm going to get one that doesn't require a phone, that has its own screen. They're a little more pricey. I think I'm going to maybe contact DJI and a couple of other companies and see if they're interested in sponsoring some videos, or doing the same thing that this other place did. I don't even remember the brand of that drone. That's how much I don't care about it. But yeah, I never planned on getting a drone, but once I used one, it's like, hey, this is pretty cool. So we'll see. Donnie Ray Reed, welcome. Are railroad signals the same between the big four companies? There are different manufacturers. We at UP, we used two manufacturers for our control systems when we updated. We used General Electric, and they did the electric code stuff. And then I can't remember who we used a system called Microlock, and I can't remember who made that one. It's the things you forget. It hasn't been that long, but I've forgotten so many details. But even at Southern Pacific, and I was told they did that because it keeps prices down. If you just start using one manufacturer, then they'll just jack up the prices. I don't know. I was never in that end of it, in the financial end of it, but we always used different. We would use SafeTran crossing equipment, gates, National Electric Gate, Western Cullen Hayes. And across the country for the four big roads, I'm sure they all do the same thing, but all of it works essentially the same way. Just differences in the way things are programmed and whatnot, but they all do the same thing. So in the end, not much difference. When I was working at Southern Pacific, I did some work on the side when Santa Fe and Southern Pacific sold their branch lines to San Joaquin Valley Railroad. They hired a company called American Signal Technologies, and I worked on the side for them with permission from the company, from SP. And I would go out on weekends and stuff, and a lot of their stuff was Santa Fe. And the prints were different. The circuit plans were different. They had different symbols and different nomenclatures and whatnot, but it was easy to figure out because it all worked the same. What am I thankful for? I'm thankful for my life. I almost died of COVID. I have, to the point where I have no linear memory of from the time I got sick until about a month or so after I got out of the hospital. I was incredibly sick, and I lived. I faced death down. This is the second time I've done that. The other times were for injuries, but I faced it down again, and I kicked its ass. And so I'm thankful for my life, and everything else that trickles down from me being alive are things that I'm thankful for. I'm thankful for my family and my friends. I'm thankful for my subscribers. I'm thankful for everything. I'm thankful for everything that happens while I'm alive. Even through the loss of my dad in July, wasn't unexpected, but there are always things that are going to happen in my life that aren't going to be good. But in that case, I'm thankful for the things that are going on and the things I do have that are still good. And I try to always focus on what's good and what's not, rather than what's not good. And as I said at the beginning, before most of you came on, dealing with my dad's estate has been it's been a nightmare. It really has been a nightmare. And it came to a point where I just had to kind of divorce myself from it and just not care about it because it was taking up too much of my emotional time. And so we took a vacation. And since then, whatever happens, happens. If we get rid of the stuff, we get rid of it. If we do, dad's gone, the family have gone and taken all the things that they wanted, and I don't care about the rest of it. I really he had a reverse mortgage. They can come put locks on the door and they can keep all the rest of that crap. I don't care. I'm going to go have fun. I'm going to go out and start shooting videos again, as I said. Going to spend time with my family. My wife and I are going to go on vacations and Harley rides and the things we do, enjoy ourselves. And even just sitting around the house, Jennifer and I don't really like a lot of the same things on TV. So she sits in the living room and watches her stuff, and I hang out in the bedroom and watch my stuff. And we're both okay with that because we still go do things together. And I'm thankful for all of that. It would be impossible for me to pick out one thing other than I'm just happy to be alive. Thanks for asking. Ruth, that is that's one of my daughters. She's Button is what they call my granddaughter, Audrey. And she says, "Hi, Papa." "Hi, girlie. You Papa's girl. She's my goofy head, my goofy ball. We eat Tootsie Pops together." Having two heads on a signal just depends on the location. If it's an approach signal of some sort, it'll have two heads. If it's a control point signal, those will have two heads. Intermediate signals, for the most part, don't require them. And I'm not familiar with railroads across the United States, but I would imagine that's the same everywhere. And it was always been that way. There are reasons to have two heads, and if they don't need them, they're certainly not going to put them up. Donnie Ray Reed, the old Mars lights and the gyrating headlight, they were two different companies. Mars was actually the name of the company that made that light, and they both worked a little differently. It seems to me that the Mars light operated like on a figure eight thing, and the gyrating headlight just rotated with an up and down thing. We actually have a gyrating headlight as a display at the Tehachapi Depot Museum, and it works. And you can turn it on and look down at the wall at the end and see how it moves the thing. But they stopped using them because, for one thing, they were very expensive when they installed them, and they had a lot of moving parts, and they required a lot of maintenance. Things would break, and they would and this is when I first went to work for the railroad, they still had those. They had them into I don't know, help me out here, some of you rail fans who paid attention to that kind of stuff. But it seems like I remember them still being in the late 80s and maybe even into the early 90s. But they just started locking them down. Whenever they would break, they would just lock them down and use them as headlights. And they started putting the ditch lights in. That's what I call them, the two lights on the running boards, and plenty of visibility. And but yeah, that's what I was told. That's what I was told why they quit using those. I'm not a financial guy or an operating department is the train department, and so not being either one of those, I just have to go by what I'm told, and that's what I was told. And going back to Donnie Ray Reed's question about the two-headed signals not being here and others being there, and there are different reasons. You know, you have some, as I said, that are approaches, and the bottom head will only have two indications, and sometimes just one. Sometimes it depends on where it is and what you're approaching, where it might just be a single lens, which is the way it was at UP. I mean, at SP, when I first went to work there, they still had uh, signal mechs that rocked on the bottom heads on approach signals. And that wasn't necessary because approaches were yellow over yellow. The bottom head was either going to be yellow or it was going to be dark. So we started putting in yellow only mechs in there. They were just a straight yellow lens, and they didn't rock. They didn't even have the polar mechanism. The On the old searchlights, they had a polar relay inside the head, and positive normal polarity rocked it over to green, and reverse polarity rocked it over to yellow. The counterweight was in the middle, and the red roundel was in the middle. And that wasn't necessary on the bottom heads. So they got rid of the polar relay part of it and just had the straight yellow. And some of the leaving signals, we have them where double track ends and goes back out onto single track. They'll have another signal on top of the regular signal that is a single position, and it's either red or it's dark. No one has been able to explain to me why they have those signals, but they're called position signals. And it has something to do with the switch. And if things aren't right, it won't light. And if you don't get that red signal, you've got to flag that location. It's really weird. I never understood why they did that, but they did it. So there are places where a second head serves a very specific function. Trains are so long now. That is part of the precision schedule railroading. They do run longer trains. Uh, and that's really the only explanation. It's more economic. It makes more financial sense. And contrary to popular belief, they don't put long trains on the ground any more than they put short trains on the ground. As I said earlier, I'm going to do a deal on derailments where I have the actual numbers. And that's just not, the numbers don't support the fact that they have more derailments today than they ever did. The people, I've heard people talk about, well, the rail this and the axle that. An axle on a car or the rail, they don't know how long that train is. They don't know how heavy it is. All an axle knows is what kind of weight is on it. Drawbars, a little different on drawbars, but like on Tehachapi, they don't run exceedingly long trains over the Tehachapi. They try to keep the trains no longer than the shortest siding. That way, if they need to put the train in a siding for some reason, they can do that. Mile and a half is about the average long train up there. And if you're ever at Tunnel 2 watching, and I want to say something right now about rail fanning on Tehachapi. The road has come in and blocked off the entrance to a few of the places where people used to go to rail fan. It's not to keep rail fans out. It's to keep the thieves from driving down there and breaking into trains when they stop. So you can park your car somewhere else and walk over that. But if you're at Tunnel 2 and you look up to the southeast, you'll see the Bealville crossover up there. And it's exactly a mile and a half from the control point at Bealville, right below the tunnel to the Bealville crossover. So if the train, that's what you can gauge. And I rarely see trains that where the rear end is still in tunnel 2 and the head end gets to the Bealville crossover. So yeah, seems that they try to keep them under a mile and a half. But once they get out on the Sunset or the I-40 corridor or whatever, not many hills, not many curves, they'll link those trains together and run them really long. I don't know what the link is. You said 11. It took a train 11 minutes to go by. He must have been going really slow, because I was up on the BNSF yesterday, just outside of town, and they ran a container train by me at 60 miles an hour, and it was long. I saw it while it was still parked. I don't know exactly how long it was, but it was a long one, and it was by me in about 2 minutes. So, yeah, if they're going slow, that's one of the things on Tashby. Trains appear to be longer than they are because they're going so slow. You get out on where they're hauling ass, and they appear a lot shorter. Yeah, I don't know why it would drive the local police crazy. Unless for some reason they need to get across the tracks. But the thing is, unless you live in some really small town that doesn't have any overpasses, there's always another way to get around the tracks, to get around a crossing. Generally, within a mile or two either direction, there's an overpass or an underpass or some other way to get to the other side of the tracks. And it's not convenient, but it is there if you need to do it. And there's some municipalities enacted laws over time that say trains can't block the crossing for more than this time or that, but they're unenforceable. The railroad was there first. In almost every case, the railroad was there first, and they have the right of way. They try not to infringe upon municipality, the right of way of a municipality when practicable. But if there's something wrong, if the train breaks down, if there's some operational thing, some reason to be there longer than that, there's really nothing that can be done about it. And believe me, the railroads don't like that. They like their trains sitting somewhere like that even less than the public does, or the first responders. They don't want their trains sitting anywhere for 15 minutes. They don't want them sitting there for 5 minutes. Baker Street, when the crew changes were still done at the old depot, they would pull right up there, and crew changes were usually done pretty quickly. If they got complaints for a train sitting there, the city would get hold of them and say, hey, what happened? Why was this train here? And the managers will look into it and try to figure out what's going on. And sometimes I've known crews that got ripped because they took too long to do a change. There was no reason for it to take more than 5 minutes. But so, yeah, I can imagine that it doesn't just irritate first responders. It irritates the public in general. And the railroads really don't, while they're not that concerned about what people think, they really don't want that image of holding things up and causing problems. They want the trains to be on the move. Donnie Ray Reed, was I with, I was SP, was still SP, and I did hire out with SP. And the San Bernardino, the Duffy Street incident was in 1989, and I remember that. I didn't work it. It was off my territory. As I said earlier, I was on the San Joaquin division, and it was forbidden to work off on another division. If you cross that line, one station across the line, everybody on that other division in the signal department, on the gangs that should have been doing that, they would have to pay all of them too. So they didn't do that. And so I wasn't involved in that. I do remember it very clearly. And I actually knew the one trainman who survived, Frank Holland. I didn't know him at that time, but I came to know him later. And I never talked about it with him. I never brought it up. figured if he wanted to talk about it, he could. And when I first met him, I didn't even realize that he was the other guy on that train. But yeah, that was one of those things where all the holes in the Swiss cheese lined up just right. Any accident, there's never just one cause. A lot of things had to go wrong for that to happen. And the first thing that went wrong, it was the Trona train, the loaded train coming out of Trona to go east. And it was listed in the manifest when they left Mojave, 4,000 tons lighter than it actually was, which would have been okay if the dynamics had been working on all the locomotives, but that wasn't the case. And I don't recall how many dynamics weren't working, but it wasn't enough to keep the train under control. And at one point, when they went through the Devore Glen Helen area, the train was going over 100 miles an hour. There was a crossing there, and the train went through the crossing, and all the controls were working just fine. The GC had GCP 300s at that crossing back then, but the warning time was 26 seconds. And that's from the time that the gates activated, and it was set up for a max speed at that time of 70 miles an hour. And the train went through the crossing. I don't remember how many seconds before. There were plenty of witnesses, but the train went through the crossing before the gates even activated. And so they were able to use that to determine how fast it was going. When it got to Duffy Street, went off, it was going about 70. And you saw the result of that. Very tragic. And then the gas line that had been deemed to be okay by the persons that had inspected it ruptured 2 weeks later and killed more people and did significant more damage. It was terrible. But yeah, it was. Yeah, I remember it. I was there. Yeah, if they were extending sightings in California, I probably wouldn't know it unless somebody called me and said, "Hey, go do a video about this." Not unusual for them to extend sightings since they're running longer trains or creating as much double track as they can. Double track is very good for keeping trains moving, but if you can't do that for whatever reason, extending sightings is the next best thing. Excuse me, I gotta get my drink. And not a cocktail. Papa's jug. I drink Propel. I fill this at 64 ounces. I fill it up with water and put a little packet of powdered Propel in it. And I usually go through 2 of these every 24 hours around this time of the year and 3 or 4 during the summer. That's better. I will call her back. That's my friend in Pennsylvania. I will call her back when I get done with this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a note so I don't forget. And we've known each other since 1986. Very, very good friends. Always had a wonderful relationship, and was really don't get to see her very often. So it was really nice to go back there and spend some time with her. And she and Jennifer got really close while we were back there. And so that takes some of the pressure off me. She calls Jennifer now. Okay, let's see. But we were talking about, extended sightings. Yeah, not unusual at all. Jerry, that's unusual that a municipality would have any anything to say about a train, the speed limit of a train, unless it's street running. Then they get more involved. But as I said, the road was there first. We got the little towns up the valley here that where the Amtrak doesn't stop, 80 miles an hour right through the towns, and they just have regular crossings. Shafter, just outside of town, about 12, 15 miles north of Bakersfield. They blast through there, and I don't recall anybody ever being hit by an Amtrak up there, but certainly a possibility. But yeah, that's unusual that a town. I don't, and again, I don't know how they would enforce a speed limit violation on a train in a court of law. I don't know how. I just don't know what are you going to do. Send a lawyer from the send a lawyer from the railroad. But I'll tell you this: unless it's a branch line, and even if it is a branch line, they still have GPS on these trains. So if they're exceeding the speed limit, the railroad's going to know it, and they're going to discipline the crews. Where you have PTC, you get 3 miles an hour. If you exceed the speed limit by 3 miles an hour, the PTC kicks in and brings. I think it just slows the train down. It doesn't bring it to a stop like if they get by a signal or something. But yeah, exceeding the speed limit. Trains don't speed anymore to make up time. That's a thing of the Casey Jones days. I doubt if the railroads ever paid any fines. They may have just crossed their fingers behind their back and said they wouldn't do it again. I don't know how that would work. That's bizarre. I've never heard of that. Learn something every day. James Cotter. Have I seen many thieves going into containers? Almost every time I go out. They're out there. You see them in their pickups full of stuff. You see them dragging stuff down the tracks, throwing stuff off the trains. When I see that happening, I don't stop. I don't get involved. I just stay away from them. Some of them are now armed. The Mexican cartels have become involved. It's become a really, really big thing. But living in California, they're not even prosecuting these people. In many cases, they're not even arresting them. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. And you would think that they would come up with some kind of a system to lock those cars down, because you can't get into the bottom car anyway because it's protected by the well. You can't get the door open. Some kind of something or another that wouldn't be complicated, that would keep them from being able to open the upper doors too. I don't know. It's bizarre. But yeah, I do see them. The guys that work up there in the signal and track department call them track treasures, because they leave stuff. I found a brand new steel bed frame up there, a really nice one a while back. And I guess they didn't want it. I threw it in the back of my truck and gave it to one of the relatives. But all the time, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah, Carl. Yeah, I've never worked in an area where we had passenger service. So I've never had to deal with any passenger train derailments. Every derailment I ever worked was freight, and many of them were huge derailments, just huge. I have pictures of a lot of them, but not all of them. And when I do my video, I'll insert those pictures, some of those photographs in there. I used to always carry my camera with me, and in the days before cell phones and whatnot. But so I usually got pictures of the derailments. And then after I started working up the valley, they just didn't have that many derailments up there. That just was very seldom that I can only remember I worked up there from 2000 until just before I retired in 2019, and I can only remember 2 major derailments up there where they had stuff where a car would come off the tracks and drag it through a crossing or something, but the train nothing ever fell over. That wasn't that uncommon, but as far as a derailment that caused significant damage and whatnot, and lots of cars, that only happened a couple of times. And but on Tehachapi, of course, grades and curves happens a lot more. On the Bakersfield side, the Mojave side, there again, not many curves. The grade's the same. It's the same on both sides, but you don't have the curves that you do, and the speed restrictions. Speed restrictions have a higher speed limit going on the Mojave side. I don't know, 10 miles an hour faster, something like that. But so Carl, I wouldn't want to have to deal with anything that involved passenger trains. I can't imagine the people that had to go over to Camarillo, where the 2008 derailment that where the UP local and the Metrolink collided head on because the Metrolink engineer was texting, they figured. And that was the accident that brought about the PTC upgrades. That was an FRA mandate after that all Class 1 railroads that haul more than a certain amount of tonnage each year had to have PTC installed. So, I'm glad I never had to deal with that. I can't imagine pulling up on a scene like that. And I mean, I've worked plenty of crossing accidents where there were fatalities and injuries, and that was bad enough. I wouldn't want to have to see a whole train full of that stuff. That'd be terrible. Glenn, keep the shiny side up. That is always my goal when I leave. US 3D 2B1. That's a good plan. I avoid getting hit by trains in general. Yes, that was always my plan as well, and still is. Yeah, Carl, and as I said, I don't. That may be the case here with the freight trains and whatnot too, as far as bringing a train to a stop if it exceeds the speed limit by 3 miles an hour. I don't know. It's not something I've ever asked anyone about. I just know that 3 mile per hour thing was something that we learned when we were being trained on the PTC before it went in. And one of the other things is that PTC is not a signal system. PTC is a communication system. For those of you who don't know, it is tied in with the signal system at signal locations that way the communication system knows if a train went by a red signal, then the radios tell the train to stop. But we weren't trained on the operation of PTC. There's my lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, she was just. I misinformed you. I said that she stayed up late watching murder porn, and she corrected me and said every time she laid down, she started coughing. She hadn't been feeling well, so we had to get. When she came to bed, she didn't wake me up coughing, so she must have felt a little better.
Yeah.
Or was just exhausted. Yeah, she got laryngitis and the whole 9 yards. So I've been avoiding her as much as possible, so I don't get it. So she's listening in. I'm glad I didn't talk any shit about her. But the PTC, we learned what it would do. We learned how it was going to be integrated into the new systems, and that's when we upgraded to all microprocessor. The PTC wasn't compatible. The systems that, not the PTC, the systems that we were installing weren't compatible with searchlight signals, and so that's why they went to LEDs. And they do have some of the microprocessor stuff because we were using it before that is compatible with searchlights, but these new upgrades weren't, and they wanted to get rid of the searchlights anyways. They were a pain in the butt. Donnie Ray Reed, why do I see CSX and NS on UPs? They all scratch each other's back. They keep track of locomotives. If they have a lot of interchange places where the railroads are interchanging with each other. And if they need a locomotive, say BNSF needs one or UP, and they don't have enough power of their own, and there is power from a foreign railroad available, they will use that power. And then if the other railroad needs somewhere down the line, they'll let them use it. It's really a very common thing. It's gone on even back in the SP Santa Fe days. You would see those units, SP on UP and vice versa, SP on Santa Fe and vice versa. It's always gone on, and it's just another way they scratch each other's backs. U.S. Marines regarding railroads back in the early 90s. I don't recall that wasn't happening on Tehachapi. Not that, or 99. Yeah, I was still on Tehachapi in 99. Tehachapi and SEMA on the SEMA sub. And I don't recall seeing any of that because those thieves were going crazy up at SEMA. I just was in a thread on Facebook. Someone showed a picture of SEMA with 3 trains stacked up there, which is unusual. They don't run a whole lot of trains out there, a good amount, but they have a whole big, the SEMA up there at the SEMA siding. It's the top of the hill, comes out of Kelso going towards Vegas, and it's a climb up to SEMA, then it levels out, starts dropping back down towards the Vegas side. And when the trains would stop up there in the siding, they were getting robbed. And this was back in 1999. So container robberies are nothing new. And so they went out there. They would send the UP cops out there after a while at night, but they still couldn't catch these guys like it is now. Unless you happen to be at the right place at the right time, you're not going to catch them. These guys work really quickly. So they went out there and they installed these big giant system of lights, like big street lights out there all through SEMA. And it's, when I first went out there, it was dark out there. And now it's lit up like a city. And they installed those in 1998, I believe. It was shortly after I took over that territory. But yeah, nobody was guarding them back then. That's for sure. But in the early 1990s, I would have been working in Tehachapi, Palmdale, and up the valley. I was bouncing around. That was towards the end of Southern Pacific, which was a very unstable time at Southern Pacific. They were cutting jobs, moving people around. I was always getting bumped, and I finally took a job in 1992, my first foreman job. I took a game foreman job because it was a little more stable. Seniority worked a little bit, foreman seniority, and even though I might not have seniority over, say, a maintainer, if he got bumped, he couldn't bump me unless he had foreman seniority. And so I thought that, and in 2 different cases, it protected me. So, yeah. And, I don't remember any military being involved back then, but I don't know. Maybe they were kind of being covert about it. I never heard about it. They never said anything about it. Michael White, good morning from Seoul, South Korea. Are you just visiting there, or do you live in South Korea? Are derailments caused by slack running in and out? It's generally not slack so much. I guess in a more broad sense, it could be that. But in the last derailment that I covered at Tunnel 2, my understanding is they had DPUs that were cutting in and out. They weren't working the same all the time. Was a and that one they ended up that they pushed off the edge of the curve there, off the outside of a curve. And but if they're going downhill, the slack is generally already taken up by gravity. And if they're going uphill, same thing. It's already the slack is out. If they need to come to a sudden break quickly going uphill, I guess. But it could be. I'm not an expert on it. I'm really not. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the train, with the handling of the train. Sometimes it's a broken rail, or some other problem with say an axle, like the Norfolk Southern derailment in East Palestine. East Palestine. Excuse me. Good grief. But there are a lot of reasons that derailments happen, and a lot of them, and I know guys that are train crews, they get mad when you say it, but most of the time it's train handling. And I'm not going to say it's slack action or whatever, but that tends to be a big cause. But yeah, I've seen plenty of broken rails that cause derailments, and low spots, sun kinks. The last major derailment, well, actually both the derailments I worked up the valley were from sun kinks. When it gets hot, I did a piece on why railroads issue heat restrictions. And when it gets hot, like it does here in the valley, it gets really hot. And if you're next to places where the rail is secured, like on a concrete bridge deck or whatnot, it gets hot, the rail starts running out and it'll kink. And it's a bizarre thing to see. I've seen them where a train, they happen and a train hasn't gone across them yet, and they get located by a track inspector and they have to fix them. It's a bizarre thing to see, but those will certainly cause derailments. Crossings, trucks hitting trains. I've seen that happen where loaded semis hit a train and knocked it off the track. And so there's multiple causes for derailments. Yeah, Carl, I have no desire to see any gruesome. I won't Google that. Thanks for the information, but I won't be looking it up. I don't like stuff like that. Michael White asked in the Santa Fe, Southern Pacific, and Union Pacific, how'd they navigate the trains through the pass? If you're talking about Tehachapi, Union Pacific didn't use Tehachapi. That was just Santa Fe and Southern Pacific. And they have a joint facility that goes back to 1900, when the Southern Pacific and the Santa Fe Southern Pacific agreed to allow Santa Fe to operate over the Tehachapi Pass to Mojave. And I'm sure the terms have changed since then, but originally it was like $80,000 a year plus 10% of all taxes levied on the properties. And they help pay for the maintenance. It's not very much. When I was a foreman, and even when I was a lead man working on Tehachapi, boy, I'm going to let her know what's going on. Hey, I'm in the middle of a live stream right now. Can I call you back?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, I'll call you when I'm done. All
right.
Love you, bye. There. Now she knows I'm not just mad at her or ignoring her. But yeah, that agreement went back to 1900, and they paid a little of the maintenance. We used to have to fill out paperwork for all the material we used and how much time we spent doing this on the joint facility. And but it wasn't very much. They paid a little bit of it, but not much. But if you're talking about Cajon Pass, they all had their own tracks. SP was the last one to build a track there. UP had one that went down. And Santa Fe, they had their own tracks down Cajon Pass. And then when Southern Pacific built the Palmdale Colton Cutoff in 1967, when they opened that, they built their own track, which came down from the other ones came down from the east side of the canyon, and SP was on the other side of the canyon, on the other side of the freeway. And it came in from the other direction. But so they all had their own tracks. And now that they're all one big happy family, they do whatever they need to do. Don Barr, thanks for checking it out. I'm glad you enjoy the channel. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you watching and joining us today. Thank you. Yeah, definitely back in the 30s and during World War II and Korea, I understand. Well, during World War II, the government operated the railroads. They took over the operation of the railroads and almost ruined them. Typical government overreach, intervention. They could have just let the railroads keep running. They would have done just fine. They would have done whatever the government asked them to do during the war. Everyone was on the same page back then, but now the government took over and just about ran the railroads into the ground. And but yeah, trains, actually, even passenger trains, freight trains, they would have military personnel on board trains. They were hauling ammunition, sensitive things like that. So yeah, that was definitely the case. And I understand that happened all the way through the Korean War. What did I think of the UP-SP merger? It was a godsend. Trainmen looked at it differently. But for we on the ground, it stabilized things. As I said earlier, at SP, we were getting bumped. Jobs were getting cut. We never knew what was happening from one day to the next. It was very stressful. I almost left Southern Pacific and went to work for one of the short lines, for one of the signal department on the short line, because it was so unstable. And I knew at least that I wouldn't make as much money on the short line, but it was going to be there. I knew that for a fact, and it still is. San Joaquin Valley Railroad's going strong, but it was on the verge of bankruptcy all the time. And when UP took over, that ceased to be the case. At SP, when we needed material, batteries or gates or whatever, sometimes we just couldn't get it. We had to just go out and literally patch things together and go beg, borrow, and steal to try to get material. In Union Pacific, that was never the case. I took the maintenance foreman job about a year after the merger, and while I had them question some of my requisitions sometimes, say, why do we need this? And big ticket items. Why do we need this? Why do we need that? But they never said, no, you can't do that. There were times where they said, instead of buying this, why don't you load up 2 crossing mechs and take them down to Los Nietos and trade them for a power switch machine or some U5, whatever. And we would do that, make swaps with each other, whatever worked out the best. But it was very stable. The only time I ever got bumped at Union Pacific was when they cut half the maintenance foreman job. At that time, all the managers had 2 maintenance foremen, and that was one of the things with the United 2020 plan. All the managers had to get rid of one of their maintenance foremen. And my boss wasn't very fond of me, so he cut my job. And I was really upset about it at first, but I ended up going, bumping the THP maintainer who wanted to be bumped. He called me and he said he was sick of it. He wanted to go back to construction. So I bumped him, spent the last 9 months of my career in Tehachapi as a maintainer. It wasn't bad. I made a lot of money. I said, wow, man, I should have been doing this all along. But no, I know that for trainmen it was different, but SP had really cushy contracts where if somebody on the train farted, everybody on the train got $100. And being facetious, of course, but that's the way it was. They had really cushy contracts. It was almost impossible to get fired or even be disciplined, really. And UP wasn't like that. They don't mess around. That's one thing I will say about them. Even with the guys on the ground, you're expected to do your job. And when UP took over, they said, we're not going to honor the Southern Pacific contract. We're going to honor our contract. And that's what they did. And, but yeah, you mess around at UP and you'll get run off. You usually get one chance, but you're expected to do your job. And a lot of people became disgruntled, and I felt bad for the people that were, but even guys that got hired after the merger, the train guys that would complain about it, I always wondered if I hated my job or the company I worked for, I would quit. I would not stay there. I'd go find something else I wanted to do, or somewhere else where I was treated a little better or whatever. But I never felt like I was treated badly by Union Pacific. I've never been a guy that needed kudos or to be patted on the back and told what a good boy I was. My agreement with Union Pacific and Southern Pacific was, I will do my job to the best of my ability, and you'll pay me really well to do it. And that's all they owed me. When I retired, they didn't even buy me lunch. My best friend bought me breakfast. Don, who just retired, I bought his breakfast yesterday, his first day of retirement. But people, I can't believe they didn't care. I didn't care. I didn't care at all. So, but anyway, getting off track. Back to the merger. Without the merger, Southern Pacific would certainly have gone bankrupt and been cut up piecemeal, would probably have ended up going to short lines and whoever wanted it, because they were not going to survive financially. They just weren't. They did not. They knew how to spend money, but they didn't know how to make money. Union Pacific knew how to spend money, and they knew how to make money, and they are very good at it. So that's my opinion on the merger. I did a video on it if you want to go back and search it with all the details but pretty much said just what I just said. What do the workers think about graffiti? Nobody cares about that. It doesn't affect operations. The shippers don't care. Most railroad cars are not owned by the railroad. Most of them are owned by leasing companies or by the shippers. And they don't care. They don't care. The graffiti artists have begun a few years ago masking out the information on the cars. So, in the railroad, if they can read their information, that's all they care about. Whether that paint doesn't affect how a train operates or anything. I was asked about the auto racks and was actually told a while back by one of these artists that I ran across. This was when I was still working. They don't paint. They don't do that if they have cars inside them. If they're loaded, they only do it when they're unloaded. There are a lot of them, and a lot of it's really, really cool. I don't understand it. Most of them are the tags of the people who did this. They have their own designs and stuff, but some of them are really cool. Seeing the big one with Homer Simpson on it and stuff. But whether we like it or not, a lot of them really are artists. They're very good at what they do. And if it's obscene, or if it is gang related or violent or anything like that, the railroad will get rid of it. But the other stuff, they don't care about. They mask the information out. They can see that. The pucks on the side of the cars that have the chip in them that the AEI system uses to identify where cars are isn't affected by paint or mud or anything else. It works. It's electronic, so it works anyway. So nobody cares, especially the workers on the ground and the guys running the trains. It's graffiti's been part of railroading for a long time now, and it's not going to go away. And if they're not going to arrest and prosecute these people for robbing containers, they're certainly not going to bother anybody about painting on trains. And I know a lot of purists hate that graffiti, but I'm not going to say I like it. but it's whatever. I really don't pay much attention to it unless it's really cool, because you do see some really cool stuff. Visiting South Korea. Yeah, my daughter, who just got hired yesterday on for a school district. She's starting her career as a teacher. But yeah, she was immersed in South Korean culture, and she went over to South Korea. I don't know, 3 times, I think. She and my wife went once. I never went. I wasn't interested in going. Not that I have anything against Korea, but I'm a very picky eater, and I would probably starve to death over there. Yeah, Donnie Ray Reed. Yeah, just what I just said. As long as it's not covering up information, the railroad certainly and the shippers aren't going to put any time or money, which is what time is. They're not going to waste resources on that. Yeah, Alex, the interlocking at Kern Junction was operated by Santa Fe and then BNSF until about 2012 or 13, somewhere in that era, and they turned it over to UP. Now operates the interlocking, and their dispatcher controls it now. But the tower was abandoned in 1970, I believe, and it was demolished in 1972. I remember seeing it as a kid, but yeah, it was a Santa Fe and then a BNSF thing. Michael White, any plans to daylight the tunnels? No. Daylighting the tunnels would impede operations a lot, and there are no real reasons to do it. The only places left would be, the only reasons they would do it now would be if they were going to make double track. And with the way the environmentalists are now, it's really almost impossible to get any of that kind of thing done anymore in California. They have tried. They were going to double track between Rowan and Woodford a few years ago, but environmentalists put a stop to that. And they wouldn't even have to daylight any tunnels. And it's only about a mile between the two sidings, but they wouldn't even let them do that. And I was surprised that maybe they just got in under the wire when they double tracked between Wailong and Marcel. That was in 2015. And I think, 2015, something like that. But they were able to do that. And it's my understanding that the Chavez place there, the UFW headquarters there at between Woodford and in Keene there, between Woodford and Rowan, had a lot to do with, initiating that. But I just think they didn't want the traffic that would have certainly been going through their place there. And I don't know, I guess can't blame them. But anyway, that didn't take place. Yeah, but daylighting tunnels, that's a big deal. And the only reason they would do it was for double track. And in that case, they'd have to blast the tunnels and then create another shelf between Marcel and Cable. There's not enough room there to put another rail. You would have to build the fill out, which would require a lot of excavation and work. And the same thing at Cliff, at Tunnel 7 and 8, between Cliff and Rowan. There's no room up there. It would entail a lot of work. So I don't see them doing that. Not just anytime soon. I don't ever see them doing it. It would impede operations too much. It's too busy. Oh, Michael, tell your nephew I always try to be safe out there. And for those of you who've never seen it, I did a video a few years ago called rail fanning safely and responsibly. So check that out. Always try to be safe out there. Never get any closer than 15 feet to the tracks. Always wave to the crews to let them know that you see them and you're not going to step out in front of them to get that shot. A lot of times rail fans are their own worst enemies. I said that long before I started a channel. I've seen them out there just doing some incredibly stupid things. And, when I was working, you'd hear the crews on the radios telling the dispatcher, we get people out here fouling the tracks and parking their cars really close to the tracks and tight zone. Just stay out of the way. Don't do stupid things, and you'll probably be left alone. Train crews don't care that you're out there. They're not going to call just because you're out there taking pictures. They're not going to call anybody. They don't care. But yeah, be safe. And Michael, again, tell your your nephew. Tell your nephew, thanks a lot. I appreciate him checking out the channel.
Sometimes trains track things.
Huh?
Sometimes trains track things. Wires.
She has laryngitis. I can't hear her.
Sometimes trains drag things that you can't see, like the wires from lumber.
I still can't understand you. They drive through what?
Drag things.
Oh, yeah. That's a point, too. She said sometimes trains are dragging things, banding, chains, cables. Sometimes things fall off of trains. I was at a crossing up the valley one time doing some work, and a train was coming, and they were doing 50 or 60 through there. And so I backed up and was watching. And it ended up being, it was a big metal pin. Looked like it was one of the pins for a knuckle, but the train didn't come apart or anything, but that thing came off, and I didn't even see it. I just heard it hit the ground, and then it hit the road, and I was plenty out of the way. But man, if that would have hit me, it would have killed me. And so yeah, if you're a pedestrian or if you're on a bicycle or even in your car, stay back a little bit. That's why the white lines are painted. But in this case, that thing hit the road on this side of the white line. There were no cars there. It was a kind of a crossing out in the country. But yeah, you never know. I always hate turning my back when I'm doing videos on the Tashby. It's not a big deal because trains are going slow, but I don't like turning my back to a train. You just never know what's going to happen. So be aware of that. Why'd they remove the code lines from the past? When they went to the microprocessor system, everything is now on the rails. So essentially, technically they still have the code system. It's just operated differently now. It's done with radios, and then on the Tehachapi, where there's no line of sight from Rowan down to Bealville, they have fiber optics that they use to operate the signal system. So it's not technically called a code system anymore, but it does the exact same thing. It just does it with microprocessors. And so, yeah, dispatchers still have to have a way to operate the systems and, throw clear signals and throw switches. But the actual coding system was abandoned. I think they got rid of that and started getting rid of it in the late 80s with the big units with all the little phone relays in them that chattered all the time. And we got rid of those and replaced those with what it was a company called Penta. And those were microprocessor units that took over. And those were in service until we started using the new microprocessor systems that are now in service. James Cotter, thank you for joining, buddy. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy it. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for checking out the channel. Carl, same thing. Thank you for checking out the channel. Have a good day. Government username. What are good entry-level jobs with the railroads? Anytime you take a job with the railroad, the only thing that's not an entry-level job is if you're hired straight out of college into management through what they call the EA system. And but as far as the entry-level jobs, it depends on what you want to do. If you go to work in the operating department Those guys, I don't know what they all start out as, but you're going to be the low guy on the totem pole, so you'll be doing maybe working the ground as a switchman in a yard. As far as being on a train, I don't know how that progresses. As I said, after all my time at the railroad, I'm still really unfamiliar with the way the operating department works. If you hire out in the signal department, you'll hire out as an assistant signalman. You go through 4 phases of training, and then you can start bidding signalman's jobs after that, and then move up as the jobs become available. You can become a maintainer, a foreman, move into management. Track department, you'll start out as a laborer, and you'll be out there driving spikes, fixing broken rails and whatnot, and doing whatever needs to be done. And then the same thing, as time goes by, you don't have to do any phases for that like you do with signal department, but in the communication department, which is kind of getting pared down now, but any department, you're going to just start out at the lowest job, and you'll be able to work your way up. Terry Rush. I'll tell you what, if there's going to be, if you are aware and have enough lead time knowing that something like that's going to happen at SLO or at Salinas, at San Luis Obispo for you non-Californians, if you know that's going to happen, something like that, let me know. Shoot me an email, motorpoet59@gmail.com. And yeah, that's the best way to do it, is through that. And let me know, and I'll come up and make a video, and we'll meet and break some bread or something and shoot a video. That sounds fun. I like doing stuff like that. Michael White, as I said, they tend not to run trains on the pass, on Tehachapi Pass, any longer than the shortest siding, which is, I used to have that stuff memorized, but I don't anymore. The trusty timetable out here. So the shortest siding up there is, oops, that's out in the desert. Shortest siding on the pass is Rowan. No, I'm sorry, it's Cliff. No, it is Rowan. 8,390 feet. So they tend not to try to not run trains any shorter than that, even though they don't use the siding at Cliff unless it's absolutely necessary. It's got a lot of curves in it, and they have pulled a lot of trains off trying to take off again. They've done a lot of streamlining up there. And during heavy rain, when we've had rain, they don't use the siding at all, because it's called Cliff for a reason. It's perched on the side of a cliff up there, and they don't want to have trains with that weight sitting on the side of the cliff. So Rowan is probably the one they shoot at. It's the next the next shortest one, and it is, I already put the book away, but it's about 8,900 feet. So that's about the length. I have seen them longer than that, but not very often. They can usually stick them in any siding up there. Alex, would I photograph trains in Canada? Yeah, if I ever I've never been to Canada. I don't even have a passport. We were going to go to Canada on our vacation that we just did, but I couldn't get I was in the middle of getting my passport when my dad passed away, and I just didn't have time to mess with it. So maybe if we get up there again, I'd love to go to Canada, and I would certainly try to shoot trains up there. It looks beautiful up there. Paul Kalf, hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yes, I did the piece on the jawbone from Mojave out to Cyril's, and I planned to follow it up soon after with the piece on the abandoned one all the way to Lone Pine. I just haven't had time. That's one that's going to require at least one overnight stay somewhere up there. And so it's something I'm going to have to plan ahead for. And things are starting to loosen up a little bit in my life. So I would really like to get that done. But yes, I would certainly want to do that. The roadbed's all plainly visible all the way up. And so I will do that at some point. All right, US 3D, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Appreciate you coming. Appreciate you watching. Appreciate the questions. From Tehachapi to Cajon. From Tehachapi itself, at the top of the hill, is that's a 360.5, and top of Tehachapi is Highland. I think it's actually. I'm not really familiar with Cajon because, as I said, I never worked down there. I've only rail fanned out there one time when I went out there and shot the videos when I was up there with Eric and Trisha that day. So I'm not familiar. So this is 65. I think Silverwood is. I don't know. Just kind of guessing at which place is which. About 100 miles, it looks like, something like that. For those of you, if any of those of you who know what those exact mileposts are out there, I'm just going by 465, which is essentially a station called Silverwood. But so about 100 miles from the top of Tehachapi to the top of Cajon. Why are they longer on Cajon than they are on Tehachapi? I really wasn't aware that they are, but as I said, Cajon Pass has especially for the BNSF, they have 2 tracks out there, so they can run trains as long as they want. They don't have to worry about sighting so much. But Cajon, while it is a steep grade, doesn't have the curves. It's kind of like the section between Tehachapi and Mojave, a lot less curvature. But as far as being accurate operationally, I can't say. I'm just assuming, and you know me, I love to speculate. But I'm assuming that that's the case. BNSF has 2 tracks, and they have the room for it, and they don't have the curvature. Road photographer. I am going to do a piece on the Trona Railroad this year. I don't know if I just put up a video that when my British friend Stephen was out, we went out there and watched the interchange switching between UP and Trona Railway at Cyril's. But I've got the call out times for the crews, and I'm going to see if I can figure out. I have a dear friends who actually, the guy, he works in maintenance out at the plant, and he has I think it's his nephew who works for Trona Railroad, and I'll see if I can get a little more information from them about what days they actually go out to Cyril's. I know that the UP goes out there on, I can't remember, either Tuesday or Thursday, but I don't know if the Trona goes up and interchanges at the same time for the Trona trains. They always come up and get the coal trains, but the coal trains don't run on regular schedules. But yes, I'm definitely going to. If you will shoot me an email at motorpoet59@gmail.com, I will I'll shoot you an email if I'm going to go out that way and do some videos. I'd like to meet you. I always like to meet subscribers. Any of you, if you're ever in the area or whatever, and you want to get together and chase some trains, or if you want to just go have lunch or something, let me know. I like people. Most people. Baby cow. That's cool. Mine means son of the smith, the blacksmith. And my dad was a blacksmith. Well, didn't do it he was a horseshoer when I was a kid, a farrier. And he did that from 1967 to 1973. And he went back out in the oil fields because he wasn't making enough money shoeing horses. But he kept all of his stuff and did ornamental blacksmithing until he was about 70. And he still had all of his stuff. Just, oh, you wouldn't believe how much stuff he had. And we donated the bulk of it to the California Blacksmith Association. And it just came out last Monday and picked all of it up. And that was a big relief to get all that stuff out of there so it didn't just get tossed. Michael White, what's the most DPUs? Back in the Southern Pacific days, they weren't. I guess they were still DPUs. They were just manned. But the old oil train used to have at least 4 or 5 in the middle of the train. Sometimes they would have a couple on the end, but not usually. But as far as that, the grain trains and the oil trains that run over the pass now usually have 3 in the middle, and coming up out of Mojave, they'll have 2 or 3 on the end, and they cut those off at Tehatchee at Summit, and they'll go down the hill without them. So that's 6 DPUs spread throughout the train, but generally the most I've ever seen just in the middle of the train was always on the oil train, and it was usually 5. It was an awesome train to watch. Alex, no, I do not. I do not model trains. When I was a little kid, I had HO scale trains, but we moved a lot, and we didn't really settle anywhere until I was a freshman in high school, and that's when I discovered dirt bikes, and everything else became an afterthought after that. I lived and breathed dirt bikes and motocross to this day. But yeah, so, and then as an adult, again, I moved around a lot, and when I finally got this place in 2001, there's no room for it. I don't know if I would have gotten into it. I don't have the patience for that. You have to, yeah. I've seen some of these setups, and I'm just astounded at the patience and the knowledge that people that do model railroading seriously would have to create those layouts. I love seeing them. I go to these little shows and stuff, and it's spectacular, but I couldn't do it. Boxcar Jerry, hello, thanks for joining us. Alex, no, during the SP days, I never went north of Madera. That was the northern boundary of the San Joaquin division. I never worked up there, even at UP, but I used to go up there. I did do a little work in Stockton one time with the other maintenance foreman up there. They had a little project going they needed some help with. And I went up there and spent a couple of weeks helping those guys out. But that's the only time I ever worked in Stockton, and I'm glad because I do not like Stockton. But the other places, Roseville, was the other one you mentioned. Yeah, Roseville. But in south of Fresno, I worked all the way up to, at one time after UP took over, when they created the California division, then we could work wherever they needed us. But my manager's territory ended, the furthest it ever went was Turlock. And I had that territory for about 5 or 6 years. And then they cut me back down to down around Madera. I can't even remember the names of those sidings down there. Oh my goodness gracious. That's the wrong timetable. To my territory ended at Lingard, was as far north as I went. After they rearranged everything, they were always moving stuff around. It was all right. I didn't care. I didn't care if I went a long way or if I didn't go so far. It didn't matter to me. I made the same amount of money wherever I was. And if I had to do work up there, I would just put my inspections together, where I would just go up north and stay there for a week or two and get everything done at one time, and then not go back up there unless somebody needed me to. But yeah, I never really worked north of Turlock. Yeah, boxcar. I was saying earlier, and my wife and I had talked about it. We saw enough in Pennsylvania that we would like to go back again, and don't know when that'll be. But Strasburg is definitely one of the places that I will go. Shoot me an email, and so we can be in touch that way. And if we decide to go back that way again, I'll shoot you an email, and we'll go look at some trains and break some bread, because those are two of my favorite things to do when I'm traveling. Donnie Ray Reed, wider crossings work longer when track equipment's going by. Sometimes those have weak shunts. Trains are a lot more solid, and they'll make and break sometimes. Not all of them. Sometimes they work just like trains, depending on the equipment. But high railers are not supposed to run with their shunts down for that reason. And but the track equipment, like if they're moving a rail gang and they've got all their equipment in tampers, those things, when they bounce around, they'll lose the shunt. And the crossings are designed to not just pick up as soon as the shunt is lost. They have a specified, a predetermined amount of time that the shunt has to be lost before the crossing will recover. And if that doesn't happen and it reshunts, the gates will just stay down until that stops happening. So that's why that happens. Alex, you're bad at speculation. I'm good at it. Yeah, I know that the Toronto Railway is called out every day at 1 PM, but most days they just switch in the yard and switch in the plant. I don't know if any of you have ever been out there to Searles Valley Minerals, the plant where they switch. They have a huge switching yard out there, storage, a big balloon track. It's really, really a very big a big facility out there. So those guys are always doing work out there. Then they go out to Searles, take their empties or take their loads out there, pick up the empties and come back, except for the coal train, which is just the opposite. Bring in the loaded coal and take the hoppers back out, empty hoppers back out. But that's something I'm going to have to do while the weather's cool because it really gets hot out there. Am I a fan of the heritage units? I think they're cool. I thought that, and I haven't seen all of them. I I'm not out there enough to do that, but I always thought the Western Pacific one looked really cool, and I get to ride on that one one time during an Operation Lifesaver deal between Fresno and Madera. So I get to ride in the cab of that one, and they were just going forward. They would go up to Madera, then they would back down to Fresno, and I did the one thing where they went from Fresno to Madera. Then I got back and got on the passenger cars that they had on the back of it for us to ride on. But yeah, I thought that was a good looking one. And I don't know, I'm not all that familiar with them. The Chicago Northwestern one, I've seen it. It was pretty cool. But yeah, the WP one, I think I would have to say I enjoyed that scheme the most. Of Jawtooth, I've watched some of the stuff on his channel. That's not really the kind of stuff that interested me that much, but I heard, people say, as you did, hey, have you seen Jawtooth? So I looked him up and watched a few of his channels. And to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of time. I watch a lot of YouTube, but it's not railroad stuff generally. I'm really into aviation, and I'm really into the space program, much more so than I am into railroads. I always tell people I like planes more than I like trains. I'm not what you would consider a classic rail fan. If it weren't for my channel, it's unlikely that I would spend much time around the railroad. There are places that if I didn't have this channel, places I would like to see. I would still do excursion trains. I love all that. I love that kind of stuff. But to go out and just and watch trains go by, I did that for my whole career. And that's not to say some railroad workers are just out of this world rail fans, but I'm just not one of them. And I don't collect. The only thing I collect that has anything to do with the railroad are my books. I love history and I love railroad history. The history of railroading fascinates me. So something fell down. Okay. But yeah, so there you go. How often do I see unauthorized passengers on trains? It's sometimes. It's not. I mean, back in the 80s, especially the 70s and 80s, and kind of up into the 90s, it was almost every train you saw had somebody on it. If there was an open box car, it almost always had someone in it. But the people who do it now, and I don't consider them hobos. I consider them, they're usually, people that are doing it now are usually YouTubers or TikTokers or something like that. We just recently had a TikTok, can't remember where it was. Somebody was just telling me about it. Somebody doing a TikTok commercial. It was a female and got stuck on a train between two cars and fell off the train and was killed. But these are not people that are using the railroad to get from one place to another because that's the only way they can get there. That lifestyle is something that is past. And so now they're adventure seekers. If you're on a train like that and you have a GoPro or a laptop and you're staying in motels at night, you're not a hobo. That's the way I feel about that. But you don't see them very often. Trains are no longer a practical way for people to get from one place, freight trains, because they might not stop. You don't know where they're going. Used to, when they had scheduled trains, you knew where they were going. You knew about what time they were going to get there. But now you might get on a train in Bakersfield and maybe it'll stop at for a crew change somewhere, but it may not even stop at the classification yard at Colton. It may just keep on going. You want to get to LA, and the next thing you know, you're in Tucumcari, New Mexico. Yes, Michael White. I have been to the Edwards open house many times. I've been to a lot of other military air shows, but Edwards is always was always the big one. And I've been inside both of those. I've been inside the Globemaster and inside the Galaxy on static display at Edwards Air Force Base, and seen them living in Tehachapi, growing up there. I saw all the planes fly. We were down at going to a motocross race down south one time, and we stopped at March Air Force Base at the Air Museum there, and they were doing touch and goes with C-17s right next to the museum. It was really cool. So, yeah, I have been inside both of those planes. Really cool, especially the Galaxy. I mean, seeing it and stepping up in it and seeing, how you access the flight deck and all that stuff is like, wow, it's just amazingly large. Donnie Ray Reed, I don't know what the policy is. Back in the day, they usually just ran them off and get them off the train, and who knows, back then, thump them in the head a couple of times, tell them to stay off the train. They probably don't, because, again, especially in California, they're not going to get in any trouble anyway. It's probably not worth the time of the special agents for the railroad and like in my area, the Kern County Sheriff. They're not going to get involved in stuff like that. They have real crime that they're trying to stay on top of, and unauthorized passengers are not one of those priorities. And so this shoulder, I'm backwards on my screen. That's a light that my daughter Chrissy got me. I have another one that says on air, but she got me those. That'd be cool when I'm doing stuff like this. But yeah, it's unlikely that they go that far. They probably just run them off. I know that the old special agent, Larry Winters, down in Bakersfield, would get them off, get their information, if they had any information, and send them packing. So, yeah, I don't think they actually get in any trouble for it. My favorite plane is the XB-70 Valkyrie. I think that is the baddest ass airplane that's ever been built. And to this day, I have I have a book about it. I love that plane. It was so far ahead of its time, and just its performance was, even though they only built two of them, but man, what a plane. As far as planes in service, I don't know. It's hard to pick a favorite. There've been a lot of good ones. I really liked the Raptor, the F-22. I got to see it fly a lot, and so yeah, I enjoyed it. And I've always thought the B-52 was a great plane. So it's hard to pick one. You know what I mean? What do I think of the conflicts around the world? I think America should stay out of them. That's what I think. As I said, I try not to get political on here, but I don't think America should be isolationist. I think there are times when we need to try to help the small guy, but in my opinion, we shouldn't be involved in the Russia-Ukraine war at all in any way, shape, or form. That's been going on since 2014, and nothing we do is really going to change that. All it's going to do is make enemies of people we don't need to have our enemies. But yeah, so I think we should mind our own business, and 99% of the cases. Yeah, Hobo Shoes. Yeah, I always never like to hear about anybody passing away, but I watched a couple of his videos as well, and was fun. But yeah, especially the way he passed away, being found like that. And I guess he had health problems. He'd already had health problems. So yeah, that never like hearing things like that. On the Harley, one of the things I love about Bakersfield is that there's so much great riding just around Bakersfield. I don't ride my bike around town anymore. I used to love to run errands on it. It's just too dangerous. Since COVID, driving changed after COVID. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but people just aren't paying attention. It's like they forgot how to drive. And the last few times I ran errands on the Harley, every time I had close calls with cars running stop signs, running red lights, coming over on me, cutting me off. So I just stopped riding it around town. I only ride it if I'm going out of town. But a few miles out of town to the east or the west, I am up in the mountains or over at the coast. There are so many roads, the canyon roads between the Santa Clarita Valley and up in the mountains south of Bakersfield, up in the Tehachapis, up on the Grapevine. I don't like freeway riding. For one thing, it's boring and it's dangerous. But yeah, there's some riding up on the Western Divide. If you go up out of Bakersfield up towards Lake Isabella, there's 2 or 3 roads that go up that way and then go across the divide, come back down out in Springville. There's just so many places to ride up here. And then on the dirt bikes, I was a motocrosser. There's a couple of tracks around here that especially there's one up in Kernville that I really like riding on. But at my age and with what I'm doing now, I would rather ride out in the desert, but my grandson doesn't want to ride in the desert. He wants to ride on motocross tracks. So yeah, thinking about selling the 450 anyway. I haven't ridden it since February. So yeah, maybe get rid of it and buy my grandson a 125. He's outgrown his 65. Alex, I don't think it's a felony. I think it's just a misdemeanor. If you break into a car, that becomes a felony. Because trespassing is a misdemeanor, but if you commit a crime like breaking into something on something that crosses state line, that becomes a felony. Oddly enough, if it's a train that doesn't cross state lines, it's not a felony. It's just like when they used to steal the cable. Stealing cable was a misdemeanor because it only went from location to location. Stealing the code line was a felony because that crossed state lines. That was bizarre, but that's the way it was. Oh, come on, Paul. Of course it was Curly. I liked all of them, but Curly was the most entertaining to watch. And I didn't mind Shemp. He had his own special way of being funny, but I think Curly was the reason the Three Stooges became as famous as they did. But they were all funny. It wouldn't have worked. They all had their specific, it's like the Seinfeld cast. If any one of those people wouldn't have been on Seinfeld, it wouldn't have been funny. Jerry Seinfeld isn't that funny. Michael Richards isn't funny at all, but together they were hilarious. Same thing with the Stooges. Deadheading is when a crew member has run out of hours and he's going to go back to a terminal without being he can't touch the controls of a train, whatever. And I don't know exactly how the hours and all that work on that with them. Again, I'm not that well versed in operations. But same thing with pilots, airline pilots. Sometimes they do the same thing. They'll sit in the jump seat in the cockpit because they're going back to their home terminal or whatever, wherever they're going, but they aren't in control of anything. They can't operate the plane. What part of the pass is my favorite? as far as the scenery and the way things look up at Cliff and between Cliff and Rowan, which is pretty much inaccessible to. If they catch you back up in there, you'll probably get in trouble. They don't want you back up in there. They know I'm up in there. I've had people come up there and I tell them, "Well, this is what I'm doing," and they say, "Okay." But and again, you're not going to get in trouble. They're not going to arrest you. Depending on the person, you might be cited for trespassing, but chances are they're just going to tell you to leave. You can't be up here. And one of the things also about that area is to get there, you have to pass through private property that is owned by ranchers. And they don't want you on their property, not because they're afraid you're going to do anything, but people leave gates open, their cattle get out, their horses get out, they get hit by trains, it causes problems. And so they don't want you up there. And if they see you up there, they will definitely say something to you. And they're old school. They might just hit you over the head with a stick, then tell you to leave. But Cliff is a really spectacular. But as far as what you get to see, I would say Woodford, because Woodford's a long siding, and there are probably at least a half a dozen places at Woodford where you can pull over, park. Nobody's going to bother you. Nobody cares if you're there. And the scenery is different. You're looking at the mountains look a little different. The trees look a little different. It's easily accessible. It's right next to the road. Woodford. I always tell people Woodford is probably the best place on the Tatch. Be a rail fan. As far as the loop, once you've seen it, it's cool. Cool piece of engineering. But once you've seen it, it's all right. But people say, and I've had people, "Hey, can you take us, like right down to the loop?" Sure, take you right down there. But when you're right down there, it's just another piece of road with trains going by, unless you go stand on top of Tunnel 9, which the last people I took out, that's what they wanted to do. So I took them down there to do that. But yeah, Woodford. I would have to say Woodford is that's always what I suggest to people. Go check out Woodford. You spend all day there, see a bunch of trains, and put a different piece of scenery in the background in just about every one of them. Donnie Ray. No, I never wanted to work on trains. When I hired out for the railroad, I didn't know what a signalman was. It was just a half-page. Well, it was actually a full-page ad in the Bakersfield, California, that Southern Pacific was hiring signalmen. I had no idea what a signalman was. I was just looking for a job. And I went down, filled out an application. They called me a couple of weeks later, and about a month after that, they hired me. And I learned that one of the big parts of being a signalman is you get to dig a lot of ditches, you get to climb poles, you get to do a lot of hard work. And thank God for anybody who works there now. The pole line's all gone, but it can be a very labor-intensive job. And even when you're in construction, you're building things. When you're in maintenance, you're fixing things. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being, you might be in the same place every day for a week or two if you're putting in a crossing or something, but you're doing something different every day. You're involved in a different aspect of that project. So, but I enjoyed that, moving around, working one place, working the other. It was really challenging. They were always coming up, as the signal systems upgraded and new stuff was introduced. And the railroad was really good about sending you to training, so you didn't have to try to figure this out in the field. They would train you on how to use it before, in a lot of cases, before they even put it to work in the field. But I thought it was challenging. It was fun. Wasn't always fun, but I liked it. It was really good. And operating a train to me would have been boring. And I'm sure it's not once you get the hang of it. I'm not saying that running trains is easy. It takes a specific skill to do that. And I understand that, but it's not something that ever interested me. I didn't want to do that. The old SB signals. Well, he's probably talking about the searchlights. The museum has two sets of searchlights. They also have semaphores, a lot of vintage crossing stuff, and all of it works. Go back and search my channel. I need to do a video that's just on that. I included the signals that we did one day in a video that I had a bunch of trains in too, and it didn't do very well. And I think that's why, because I didn't do a specific one. But I do have one that about the vintage signals. It's called the Inside Story or something. It shows how all those things work, how the mechanisms work that operate the semaphores and all the stuff. Anything you had moving parts inside, I showed in that how all that worked. But the museum has a fully operating signal guard, and it's really cool. Those signals belonged to my first boss, Bill Stocco, who acquired all those signals, and they were all in his backyard in working condition. He had all those working. When he passed away, his wife sold the bulk of the collection to the city of Tehachapi, who then turned them over to the Tehachapi Depot Museum, who installed them and got them working again. Some of the other signals she sold. She sold off some of his stuff because the city wouldn't have had anywhere to put all of the museum wouldn't have had anywhere to put all of them. There were too many. It was amazing. They all fit in his backyard. Some of them were in his front yard too. What led to the demise of the caboose? The crew in the caboose were originally there to monitor the brake system. The trains were braked from the rear, and so they monitored the brake pressure, and they kept an eye on the train. Make sure nothing was dragging, nothing was on fire, nothing was smoke and whatnot. And when they introduced the end of train device, Fred, that negated the need for them to be monitoring brake pressure. And then we have, once that our wayside detectors, the hot box detectors, high wide, whatnot, once those became very reliable in the late 70s, then there was really no need to have anyone on a caboose. Those things are perfectly capable of figuring those problems, dragging equipment, hot boxes, whatnot, high wides, even though UP has shut all their high wides off. But those things are all done by detectors now. And I have a video on how detectors work, and how hot box detectors, slide fences, whatnot. Go back and search that. Go into the playlist called it's how things work one's how things work on the railroad, and one's how things work in the signal department. I can't remember the exact names of them. That's loaded with informational videos about how things work in the railroad. Thank you, Michael White. Thank you for joining us today. And again, thank your nephew for checking out the channel. I really appreciate it. They don't move cabooses at all anymore. The railroad doesn't use cabooses. The only time you'll ever see a caboose anymore on a train is what they call a buffer car, and they're usually on locals. And no one's allowed. They're bolted shut. You can't get inside them. And they might have a crew member standing on the platform of one of them. And that's all they're used for anymore. Other than that, they're all gone. They don't move cabooses around. I haven't seen a caboose in a rail yard in decades. They scrapped most of them and sold a lot of them. They were selling them. I know Southern Pacific was selling them for $1. You just had to pay to get them moved. Yeah, the one at the Fresno yard, that is for what's called the Madera Flyer. It's a local that runs between Fresno and Madera, and it's a buffer car. They can't go inside it. It's they don't even stand on the platform much, but it's used as a car to when they're doing switching. When you see like an oil train or the grain train, sometimes these big unit trains, they'll have a buffer car between the locomotives and the first or last cars, they will have buffer cars sometimes there for the same reason, to protect them from the slack running in and out. Then they'll have a dead car in between, a car with a load in it, say if a load that's dangerous or whatever. And that is the same thing that they use the caboose up there that you saw. All right, folks, I have got to get going myself. Wow, 3 hours. It does not seem like 3 hours. These things, it never feels like that long, but I'm hungry. I'm going to go make something to eat. And I got a couple of things I want to get taken care of today. Thank you all for joining. It's been a pleasure, as always, seeing everybody. One more question here. Done you seen any train crew members at range in that struck something at the crossings? Yeah, Donnie Ray, unfortunately, way too many times. Way too many times. I've seen that. It's terrible. It's terrible for us. It's really terrible for the people on the locomotives. That really, sometimes that is really an emotional burden for crews on trains. All right, everybody, take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Happy Thanksgiving. Keep watching. I got plenty of cool stuff planned coming up. And so I really appreciate all of you, and have a good day.